sorry. This is all procedural stuff, guys. It's 4:58, so we have to unfortunately wait till 5 o'clock, Mr. Chairman.
We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Seeking approval of the agenda. Is that a roll call vote or?
No, that's one you can do by motion and just asking if everyone approves, unless there are changes to it, and then we'll work from there.
If there's no changes to the agenda, I'll seek a motion for approval.
Make a motion for approval of agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then you would normally ask if any are opposed, and then just announce the vote. Motion carries.
None opposed? Motion carries. Next, we'll move down to selection of vice chair. Is that a nomination from the board? Or is that a,
You can start with discussion on that, and then when you're ready for a vote, you can go forward with
I'll
that.
open up for discussion on vice chair nominations.
I nominate Todd for a vice chair. Commissioner Brayson.
Thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate that. I'd like to say it's an honor to be serving on the board. As many of you know, I'm maybe the youngest ever elected in Jackson County and possibly in the state, so it's a real honor. And it would be an honor to serve as vice chairman. So I will accept that nomination.
Do we have a second on the nomination? For
I'll
Mr.
second
Brooks?
it.
And clerk is going to be doing a roll call vote.
Commissioner Stribling,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Bryson,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Chairman Ledson.
Yes. Motion carries. And congratulations, Mr. Vice Chair. Moving down our agenda, we have our bonds for the sheriff and register of deeds. Mr. Adams.
So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, annually, when a new sheriff or a sheriff is reelected, the board has to approve the amount of the bond amount for the sheriff and also for the register of deeds in this election cycle. The maximum amount allowable for the sheriff is $25,000, and for the register of deeds, it's $50,000. You know, for timing's sake, because all of this has to chain react, the finance office had to go through, and we normally go through and go at the highest amounts allowable. I'll give you, for example, and those are limits set by the state. If you take a look at, say, myself or the chairman, we're actually at $250,000 bond. So we do recommend that you go to the highest amount allowed by the state. So it is requested for this board to approve the sheriff's bond amount of $25,000 and the register of deeds bond amount of $50,000. Do they need to be separate? They probably do, don't they? Or should?
It'd probably be good to do it. It would-
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Do we have a motion to approve the sheriff's bond at 25,000?
I make a motion that we approve the bonds for the sheriff at 25,000, the register of deeds for $50,000.
Second.
We need to have them separate.
It'd be better if they were separate, if you
just
want
the
to do the
sheriff.
sheriff's first.
Okay.
A second on just the sheriff's.
I second that motion.
Ms. Winchester.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Bryson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Stribling,
Yes.
Chairman Letson.
Yes. And then we need to have a register of deeds bond, motion for approval for 25,000.
I make a motion for approval of 25,000 for Ms. Chandra Sims.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to unfortunately ask you to remove that, to withdraw your motion. It's $50,000.
I'm sorry, a motion to approve Ms. Sims at $50,000.
I withdraw my motion and I approve Ms. Sims for $50,000.
Second.
Vote.
Commissioner Stribling,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Bryson,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Chairman Letson.
Yes. Next item on the agenda is the adoption of rules and procedures. And if everyone's taken a look at those, we've got some modifications to the rules. Mr. Adams, would you like to?
Yes, sir. So everyone, and sometimes, let me grab this, I apologize. So, again, all this is just process and procedure conversation. That's the point of today's meeting. And really, we'll continue to have these conversations in the next handful of meetings until all of the processes are worked out. So a couple things, excuse me. Sometimes I make statements just to let the board know that you all already obviously know, meaning I've met with the commissioner-elects before you were sworn in, and you all were given this red book, this book that's named Suggested Rules and Procedures for the Board of County Commissioners, the 4th edition, written by Trey Allen. And then ultimately what we have online here is we have the modifications to these rules. These are short, significantly shortened rules from Robert's Rules of Order. It's something that comes from the School of Government that I believe is a lot of common sense, just thoughts and processes that allows you as a board to proceed forward with rules in place, but not to complicate your jobs too much in this conversation. So just for the board, public information and obviously board's information, you all have had an opportunity to read this book, and that we can go through the modifications that's being recommended. But I leave it to you how you as a board wish to proceed. Because if you choose to move forward with whatever you adopt tonight, you're adopting these rules with the modifications that you see online. Is there,
Is there a motion to adopt the modifications?
before we do that, we do need to have just a couple things in here to fill in.
Okay.
But if everybody, I guess what I'm asking, does anybody feel the need to go through the details of this, what I'm calling the red book, but it's the rules and procedures written by Trey Allen? This is the rules and procedures that the previous boards have used for quite some time.
Are you asking about the details of the whole book?
Yeah, the whole book, or do we just want to go over the modifications?
Let's just go over the modifications, I think. What do you say?
Is everybody in agreement? Okay. I'm just trying to offer to the board whatever you're looking from myself and staff. So what you do have in front of you is the proposed modifications to the suggested rules, procedures for the Board of County Commissioners. As you can see, this first blank, these modifications are adopted, which would be December 5th of 2022, if the board chooses to move forward with it. You can see this is applicable to Jackson County. Ultimately, when you sit and look at the rules themselves, it does go through and talk about the remote participation in board meetings. One of the things I do want to point out, this does refer to, if you look at B, during the state level declared emergencies, you'll follow provisions for remote meetings as set forth as that general statute. And again, this is the purpose of today's meeting. You know, there are some times that some commissioners do need to remote in, whether you're ill or there's just something going on. Just to let you know, though, we are out of a state of emergency, which defers us back to standard rules. And Ms. Baker, I may defer to you a little bit in these conversations that although commissioners under these rules are allowed to participate remotely, it is highly recommended that their vote cannot be the deciding vote on issues. I just wanted to make sure everybody understands that. If you choose to participate remotely, then if it ends up being a 3-2 vote, your vote cannot be the deciding vote. Okay.
And
Is that-
we must have a quorum present here in the room, so you cannot make the quorum by being remote. And that's just because North Carolina law doesn't really have a provision without the state of emergency for appearing remotely. And so we make sure that we cover any potential challenge by making sure that a quorum's present and that a deciding vote is not the remote vote.
So just point that out to the board. The next section, and I'm not going to read this verbatim because this all has been online and you all have had an opportunity to read it. You can see on Rule 8, it's just really going through the organizational meeting processes, and you can see even number of years. Look at odd number of years, you can see that we would hold our organizational meeting during our first meeting in December. So if that doesn't fall on a Monday, then we're not meeting on the first Monday in December. If we stayed on Tuesday's schedule, it'd be Tuesday next year to be your organizational meeting. Just scrolling on down, as you can see, it gives a little bit of information in regards to presiding officer, who is the chair. As you can see, these rules a lot of times refer to the election of a chair, but of course in Jackson County, the citizens elect the chair, so some of these rules are not exactly applicable to Jackson County. You can see, scrolling on down, Rule 10 is the area in which we need the board to make final decisions on, and that really is, currently we meet your regular meetings are scheduled the first and third Tuesdays of the month. The first one being at 6 p.m., the third being at 1 p.m. And then that is your regularly scheduled meetings. And outside of that, you generally have a work session on the second Tuesday. So current schedule is first Tuesday at 6 p.m., regularly scheduled meeting. The second Tuesday, a work session meeting at 1 p.m., and then the third Tuesday, a regularly scheduled meeting at 1 p.m. That is the current schedule, and I'm sending it back to the board for general discussions about if that's the schedule you wish to keep.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the 6 o'clock meeting is designed so people who want to speak to us, when we have our public comment time, which they get 3 minutes, individual, allows them to be off work and be here. That's the purpose.
I would prefer that all the meetings be, 6 o'clock, so that the public has an easier access to us commissioners to discuss.
Well, I think that I work full-time, so, I can't be here during the day. I'm off every other Tuesday. I'm not trying to make it all about me, but I think we could have work sessions maybe at 1 o'clock. You said the second Tuesday, is that correct?
Correct, yes, sir.
And then it's up to y'all, but have the meetings at 6 o'clock, first and third. So, How do y'all feel about that? Mr. Stribble?
Doesn't matter to me one bit.
I mean, the work meetings are open to the public as well, so.
I've said this before, the 1 o'clock meeting is always in daylight. And Mark, you'll soon know, driving up that mountain in fog and acclimated weather can be challenging, particularly with the construction and the road. So that was my comment a few years ago, and I kind of stick by that for safety purposes.
So we would have our regularly scheduled work meetings would be at 1, and our board meetings would be at 6.
And just the reminder of the board, work sessions do not have public comments. The first and third meetings, they do have a public comment section. Work sessions are exactly that. They're meant for the board to sit and communicate amongst yourselves, and then also whoever's invited to the work session to have
They're open.
conversations. They're open to the public. They don't have public comments. And I only mention that because when you mentioned that you were thinking that having night meetings would be more open to public comment,
Right.
the work sessions do not have public comment.
Yeah,
So,
they don't have comment, but it still allows the people to
yeah,
know.
yeah, they're still, all your meetings are open to the public.
Also accessible by video too.
Yes.
Yes. No, I'm fine with work sessions.
We've got a great IT team over there.
So do we need a motion for the times?
If there's consensus on that, we can, that can be part of your adopting the modifications and the rules, is to put those in as your meeting dates and times.
We're good, everybody good with Tuesdays, or does anybody have any conflicts?
Tuesdays.
Then I say, let's move forward with the regularly scheduled meetings held at the first and third of the month be at 6 p.m. and then our work sessions be at 1 p.m. And if there seems to be some issue, we can always bring it back up at a later time.
That's,
Upon adopting this, if we need to make a modification in the future, we can always change that. I wouldn't like to, but
so just because this is all process meeting, so sometimes like when we try to get a consensus, it really is, Commissioner Stribling, are you in agreement, Commissioner Jones? I mean, before you actually take a vote, that's the kind of consensus. So if that's where you're going, the only reason I mention that is because where you're asking whether or not you vote on this separately or not as a whole, it's really depending upon whether or not you're unanimous. You don't want to have someone vote against this based on this one section, but be in favor of everything else. So when we start talking about determining a consensus, I'm just describing previously, so it would be really, if there's a consensus of each member, then you can vote on the entire document as a whole. If there's not a consensus, then you need to break out the vote.
Mr. Adams, will we be at liberty to change these times?
Yeah, within the rules itself, these are your rules. You can come back and modify the rules. I never recommend constantly modifying rules, but that is something that can be readdressed.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. If they do agree on the 6 p.m. today and it ends up not working out for whoever, we can revisit that at a later date, is that correct?
Is that correct?
You can, as you said, these rules can be amended at any regularly scheduled meeting, and then your regular meeting times can be adjusted, and it just has to go through the notification process again, which your clerk takes care of. So yes, that can be done.
Yeah, what is the notification period if we do make a change? About through that 30 days in advance, or?
For the regular meetings, that we would want to have it at least that far in advance, because they get posted and they go on the website and they get sent to what we call the sunshine list, which is all of the press. For special meetings and emergency meetings, you don't have that long of a notice period, but for the regular meeting schedule, we'd want to give advance notice.
So in special meetings, it's 48-hour notice. Emergencies, it can be quicker, but a couple things to note about special meetings is you're limited to the topic that you notice, right? So You can add things, but there has to be very special circumstance when you, and all this is addressed in this book here. Emergencies obviously need to be emergencies themselves.
Do we have a consensus that I guess, the 6 PM regular meetings and then 1 PM commissioners' work sessions?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on, then you can see the modification. You can see how agendas are prepared. Ultimately, if you look at 15, it's mainly concentrating on how commissioners get items on the agendas. And then 17 is really getting in the general public consensus, or general public, how they potentially get on the agenda. Rule 18 is just the order of business. And it's basically how tomorrow night's is ordered, and so that is the standard order of business. Rule 19, it does specifically talk about the voting by the chair. And then ultimately, I may have quickly gone, yeah. It does specifically state the chair does vote. And then it does talk about in Rule 21, when the presiding officer or the chair is in a debate or discussion, sometimes, it doesn't happen often, but if you're really in it, sometimes you make the presiding officer the vice chair if you feel more comfortable, depending on how much you're into the discussions. If you feel like you can't also manage the meeting at the same time you're trying to discuss, I don't think I've ever seen it. Have you ever seen that happen?
No, and actually, one of the changes we made here is to make that may,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
not required. So it depends on the situation, but I haven't seen it happen either.
I haven't seen it happen.
Yeah.
The Rule 23 is to note here is a second is required on all motions. You read in the book, it talks about it being a single motion allows you into debate and discussion, but it's always been the thought that, if you're actually going to vote on something, that at least two of you should be in agreement that it should be discussed and voted on. So right now, in order for a topic to actually be considered and voted upon, if you adopt these rules, it would require a motion and a second for it to be voted upon. And again, you can actually change that, but I'm pointing that out for you. The other item is duty to vote. This is something that, as you proceed forward, existing commissioners have gone through this training, and if you go through on that online training or that the school that I've mentioned to you all, they will go in a little bit more in depth about this. But each board member does have a duty to vote. A lot of times, you will think that there are conflicts, but the conflicts are actually fairly limited. We won't necessarily get into that today, but you'll be surprised how little you're actually really conflicted out of a vote. That's why we have an attorney to give you advice on that. And then ultimately, you can see that if a member who's not been excused from voting under D there fails to vote on a matter, the member's failure to vote shall be recorded as an affirmative to vote. And so that is a choice for this board too, when you're adopting your rules, is affirmative or negative. In the past, it's always been affirmative. And so just letting you know, if you just did not, when the clerk calls roll and you just don't vote, then it's actually going to count as an affirmative. Obviously, you can see nominations for appointments. I do want to talk to you all a little bit about that because you're going to be talking about appointments quite a bit here in the next few meetings. So when you go back and read this, there's also a section in here that you can use the nomination process, but there's a section here that you can also just make a motion to appoint. This nomination process is generally when you all may or may not agree, or there's more than one person. So, because you all, as a board, make a lot of appointments, not just the appointments that you're dealing with coming up in the next couple of weeks. So I just wanted to mention to you, a lot of times there will be a recommendation that comes from an organization, or there'll be a recommendation that comes from a commissioner, because the commissioner from that district is making the recommendation. There's really no issues amongst the board, meaning there's nobody else you're willing or wanting to put up, and you don't necessarily have to go through the nomination process. You can go straight into making a motion to appoint, second to appoint, and move on. But again, but if there's ever more than one person being nominated, then that's what this nomination really is for. And I want to throw that out and talk about this a little bit because I've seen boards, sometimes we get in, do we nominate, do we appoint, and I'm just letting you know that a lot of times you don't have two or three people waiting in line. You have one person that you found willing to serve and it's coming from that district, and it really is as easy as just moving forward and you make the motion, somebody's willing to go with the second, and then you just move on. Is that a correct?
Yes.
I'm probably not doing it as professional as I should, but I'm just,
Appointments, you still need a second.
yes, you do. And I mentioned that, it's just not, sometimes I see people get, well, do we nominate, do we appoint, do we move forward? And we get into this whole conversation when the reality is there's only one person you're talking about anyways. And so you just go straight into the appointment. And this book does allow for both processes to happen. Okay. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, that's a summary of the proposed rules, modifications. So I think the motion would be to adopt the suggested rules and procedures for the Board of Commissioners, the fourth edition by Trey Allen, with these modifications to the rules.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Ms. Clerk?
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Bryson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Stribling,
Yes.
Chairman Letson.
Yes. Moving on to item number 4, appointments and boards. Mr. Adams, did you want to go over those at all, or?
Can I add one thing? Will you make sure your microphones are on for the record? Everything's got to be recorded, including discussion. And so I don't know if you're turning them on and off, but it's best if you will just leave them on, because when she goes back to listen to do minutes, she won't hear and the public won't hear unless your mics are on.
Mine keeps going off when I turn it on.
Well, it's still on. It's just, it'll pick up your voice when you talk.
The
So
light goes off.
it's okay, yeah. that's
So
okay.
what happens, like Commissioner Bryson, just tap your microphone. See how the light will come on. So when it picks up your voice, it'll come on by itself.
No. Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
So I really defer to the board. What I'll do is just do a real quick summary of what's in front of you so the public understands what you all are taking up at this point. The boards that are in front of you are appointments for county commissioners to serve on these boards. As stated before, to the general public and to anyone else, there are quite a few boards that you, as a Board of Commissioners, make appointments to, planning boards, recreation board, things of that nature. These are boards that you serve as commissioners. And so as you can see, what I have here is the previous boards, individually, their boards that they served on. So obviously, we have Commissioner Stribling and Commissioner Jones that are currently serving on those boards, and then you can see where there are vacancies from the previous commissioners. So it really is up to this board to have a discussion in regards to who gets appointed to what board. What I have also provided, and this is good information for the public, is, so for example, the Road Naming Board, we have who's on it. 2-year terms, meet as needed under supervision of emergency management. That actually doesn't meet that often. Let me find another one. So the RPO, you can see who's on the RPO, and you can see the schedule, 2023 schedule to be determined. I'm trying to find an example here. All right, here we go. So you can see the Health Board. And then down here, you can see they've already got next year scheduled out. So you can see when the meetings will occur, what time they generally occur, and we try to provide that information for each of these boards so you can decide whether or not you're able to make the time commitment and if you're interested also.
If there's no objections, I would like to table this discussion and speak with Mr. Stribling and Mr. Jones regarding what boards they may or may not want to be on that they're currently serving under, and then readdress it at tomorrow's normal session, regular session.
I would like to say, if I could, Mr. Chairman, ask Ms. Baker and Mr. Adams if they, did you find any conflict of interest of me serving on the mountain projects? I know that a letter was sent stating that I would not be able to serve on that committee or that board. And I would like to hear before, if that's okay, and if it's all right with y'all, if I can or if I can't.
So when we follow through, referring to, I did receive a letter from Mountain Projects that did state that there potentially would be a conflict with Mr. Bryson serving on the Mountain Projects Board because of familiar relations to the executive director. And I believe, are you all cousins? Is that
Like second or third cousin.
second or third cousins? Okay. And so that is something that I'd shared with the group when we were going through our planning process, organizational process. So I did go follow up and asked additional questions to Mountain Projects. Basically, my additional questions really related to legal, trying to figure out and define a legal conflict versus a perceived conflict. So the first, we did talk about the legal conflict and from the county side, and so I will defer to our legal counsel on that.
From the county side, as Mr. Adams referred to earlier, it's very unusual for there to be a conflict, an actual legal conflict that's going to affect you in some ways. And a couple of you have already contacted me about potential conflicts, and almost always the answer is no. And that's the case here. There's no legal conflict from the county side that prohibits you from serving on that board.
I would like the record, be on record that my brother was a supervisor at the HUD department, and so I don't think there'd be any conflict of interest of me serving on a board when we come to the appointments and voting. I think that it wasn't a good departure, but that has nothing to do with me and serving on the board of
So
Mountain
the
Project.
follow-up, so what I did was I asked them to respond to us in regard, they, meaning Mountain Projects, in regards to, are there any legal conflicts, but then are there any policy conflicts?
Right.
Okay. And so to start with the legal conflict from the county, there is no legal conflict from the county, but I asked Mountain Projects, do they have legal conflict? Because we don't know all of their internal workings and a policy conflict. They do have a conflict of interest policy. And within that policy, it does indicate, it does refer to not only just actual legal, but perceived. And when there is perceived a potential perceived conflict, then they do have a process in which they involve additional board members to discuss it. And that's basically where they're at in the process. They've gone and have some additional board members and they're responding to us to let us know whether or not they see or perceive. I believe at this point, I've received some information where I believe there will be a perceived conflict, but we're still looking and investigating this, and that's where I'm at in the process.
I understand completely, yeah. Yeah, I'd spoke with Richard Frady, he's on the board, and he said that he did not see any conflict, given that she had hired my brother a couple of years ago to be one of the supervisors at the HUD department. But
Yes.
if it is a perceived conflict, then we'll move forward, and I won't serve on that board.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. And I'll follow up. We can continue these conversations for tomorrow. And then just so everybody knows, you've got the work session coming up the 13th, and then December 20th. I would hope maybe by December 20th, that regular meeting, that all of this would be worked out and researched and discussed, and you all will be able to do your final appointments on all these boards. It may be quicker than that, but I'm just letting you know, we just started. So you've got tomorrow as your first meeting, and then we've got a work session, and then we have another meeting, and it gives you multiple meetings to have your, some conversations like you just mentioned, Mr. Chairman, with with Commissioner Jones and Commissioner Stribling, and all that can occur between now and the next few meetings.
Perfect. If there are no objections, I'd like to hold off on that for this meeting.
And for the board's information, I also went ahead and put this as an agenda item in our notice for tomorrow night's meeting.
Thank you.
Make a motion to table the committee assignment appointments.
Second.
Second.
All, Ms. Angie?
Commissioner Stribling,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Bryson,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Chairman Letson.
Yes. With no further business, do I have a motion for adjournment? Or Mr. Adams, do you have any closing comments?
No, sir, I'd just like to say congratulations again and welcome, and look forward to continuous success with this board.
And thank you all as the three of us learn the process. It may take us a few meetings, but we'll get there. I promise you guys won't have to.
I would like to make a closing statement. I'm looking forward to working with Commissioner Dribbling and Mr. Jones, Commissioner Jones, excuse me. When I started out running the campaign, I didn't want to get too political because of my job, and things like that. And I set out to do what's right for the county, not for political purposes at all. So I'm looking forward to working with y'all and working with John and Mark as well, and Miss Winchester, Baker, and Adams, and the rest of y'all. So thank y'all.
I'd like to echo Todd's statement, and just humbled that the people of Jackson County has selected me to represent them.
No further business. I have a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Winchester. Do we take
You can do it all in favor.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.